Azima was born under a moon that refused to hide. It hovered in the night sky like a single unblinking eye, silver and full, watching everything. The old women of Agala whispered that such a birth was an omen, not good, not bad, just dangerous. From the moment she cried her first cry, there was something in her gaze that unsettled people. She was too still, too quiet, too watchful. But it wasn't until she was 7 that they began to understand just how strange she truly was. The first time Azima heard a lie, she was sitting beside her uncle as he spoke to her mother. He had come for yam seeds, claiming his harvest had failed and his stores were empty. Her mother nodded with pity and handed him 2 bags. But Azima, eyes fixed on the floor, tilted her head suddenly and whispered, "He has 4 bags buried under his bed." Her uncle froze. Her mother's hands trembled. Her uncle laughed it off as childish nonsense, but 2 days later, when rats swarmed into his compound, they chewed through the hidden bags of yams, and the truth spilled out with the grain. At first, her mother scolded her. "You must not say such things aloud," she warned. "Let adults deal with their own truths." But Azima didn't understand. If something was real, why pretend it wasn't? Why did her mother's voice shake when she said, "It is dangerous to know too much"? Azima's gift was not something she learned or asked for. When people lied, she didn't just suspect, she heard it. Their spoken words came in one voice, but beneath them, faint and whispering, a second voice slipped through. A truth that contradicted. A soft tremor in the air. Like wind moving through hollow wood. By the time she turned 10, she had exposed a boy who pretended he hadn't stolen from the market. She'd warned a woman about her husband's second wife in another village. She whispered to a widow that her accidental fire was set by her own jealous cousin. Truths fell from her lips like stones in water, and the ripples reached further than anyone liked. At first, some of the villagers called her blessed. But that changed quickly. The truth, it turned out, was not welcome in Agala. By 13, Azima was watched more than she was greeted. Mothers crossed themselves when she passed. Elders cleared their throats and walked away if she stood too close. Her mother tried to keep her inside, teaching her to grind millet and sew baskets, anything to keep her quiet. But Azima was not built for silence. There was always someone outside the hut lying. And their words, no matter how gentle or rehearsed, always cracked, always split in her ears. She couldn't ignore it. Once, a healer's son told the village he had seen a spirit near the river. He wanted to be praised, to be feared. But Azima looked him in the eyes and said, "You were with the brewer's daughter." The spirit was her shadow. The laughter that followed humiliated the boy. That night, her mother found a dead lizard nailed to their door. But it didn't stop Azima. At 15, she sat quietly during a village council and listened to Elder Baiko declare that a family dispute was caused by a son's disrespect. Azima raised one hand, shy but firm, and said, "The elder wants the land." He made the son angry on purpose. The room had gone so still, even the fire seemed to freeze. That was the day the village turned cold toward her completely. The next morning, Azima found a ring of black salt around her compound. Her mother wept as she swept it away. "You should not have said that. Even if it's true." "But it is," Azima replied. "Why can they lie and I must stay quiet?" Her mother had no answer, only tears and warnings. The rumors grew louder. The children whispered that Azima spoke with demons. Some claimed her tongue glowed red when she heard lies. Elders called her a curse dressed in a child's skin. She had never hurt anyone, but truth, it seemed, could burn deeper than a knife. She stopped going to gatherings. People stopped coming near. The only ones who visited were the desperate, a mother looking for her missing child, a man afraid his wife might poison him, a girl with tears in her eyes asking, "Did he love me, truly?" Azima never asked for gifts in return. She didn't speak often now, but when she did, her words always rang clear. Cold. Unforgiving. Real. And that made her dangerous. She had become a mirror in a place where no one wanted to see their reflection. And even mirrors, when they shine too brightly, are eventually broken. What no one realized was that Azima had already started to listen differently. Not just to lies, but to who lied most often. And to why. And in that silence she was forced into, she began to grow something. Something deeper. Something hotter. It would be years before they understood what they had raised. And by then, it would be far too late. The land dispute had been simmering quietly for months, just another crack beneath the surface of Agala's orderly ways. The family of Ndalo had long tilled a narrow but fertile strip near the river bend, passed down through 3 generations. But one morning, wooden stakes appeared in their field, fresh markings carved by a village official, and a proclamation nailed to a tree. The land now belonged to Elder Mba's family, by ancestral right. The elders claimed it was resolved with proper ritual and record. The villagers muttered, but no one dared challenge Mba, a towering man with clouded eyes and a long staff said to be carved from the first baobab ever struck by lightning. What he lacked in kindness he made up for in presence. His word was heavy. But Azima, still watching from the shadows at 16, heard differently. She had wandered too close to the council hut one night, as she often did. They never saw her bare feet moved silently over dry earth. Inside, Mba laughed as he told a junior councilman how easy it had been to forge the claim. Old Ndalo's boys can till mud now, he spat. Next time they speak, I'll take their goats too. Azima didn't sleep that night. The next morning, before the village drum had finished calling for work, she stood barefoot in the square. Her voice didn't tremble. Elder Mba, she said. You stole the land. You lied with fire in your mouth and ash in your teeth. A hush fell over Agala. Women stopped weaving. Men lowered their tools. Mba turned slowly, his lips stretching thin. What did you say? Azima stood straighter. You lied. You never earned that land. You stole it because you thought no one would dare speak against you. A ripple of gasps broke the silence. For a long, eerie moment, Mba did not speak. Then he smiled, not with amusement, but with cold precision. Then let her speak no more, he said. By midday, the council had been summoned. The elders sat beneath the flame-carved arch, faces lined with years, their feet dusted with chalk. In the center stood Azima, unflinching. Her mother knelt beside her, clutching her arm, eyes wild with fear. Mba was the first to speak. This girl, he said, practices truth sorcery. She sees what she should not. She hears lies like spirits hear breath. This is no gift, it is a threat. Another elder nodded solemnly. Our ancestors forbade such power. The tongue is sacred. But hers is corrupted. She is not a curse, her mother pleaded, her voice cracking. She is only a child. A child who speaks what is. You fear her because she cannot be controlled. But the villagers had gathered in droves now, their faces masks of confusion, guilt, fear. They remembered the lies she had torn open, remembered the shame. Few had the courage to speak on her behalf. She has no proof, someone called from the crowd. Just whispers. And what of the tongues she has already burned, another added. Families divided. Secrets revealed. No peace has followed her truth. Mba raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. The sentence, he said, is decided. The high priestess stepped forward at last, her white robes trailing smoke from the sacred incense at her feet. She was old, older than any remembered, her eyes milky, her voice rarely heard. But she said nothing. Only nodded. 2 guards emerged with a small iron bowl, its contents already glowing, charcoal and coals as red as the setting sun. Azima's mother threw herself between them. No! You will not touch her. She was pulled away, kicking, weeping, cursing every elder by name. Her wails twisted through the crowd like wind through broken trees. Azima did not resist. She only looked at Mba, directly. And in her eyes, there was no fear. Only something ancient. Something that did not belong in a child. A third guard stepped forward with iron tongs. He lifted a coal from the bowl. "Open her mouth," MBA commanded. Azima did not scream immediately. She tried to remain still. But when the coal touched her tongue, a sound erupted from her that no one in Agala would ever forget, not because it was loud, but because it sounded like more than pain. It sounded like fury. Like an entire forest catching fire in a single breath. As her body shook and they released her, something strange happened. The ground beneath the square rumbled faintly. Not a quake, just a warning. Dust lifted into the air. The villagers looked down in confusion. Then every torch, every cooking fire, every ember in Agala, flickered. For a heartbeat, all flames shrank to a dying whisper, then roared back up, brighter than before. Women clutched their children. Elders looked to the sky. The high priestess turned her head slightly toward MBA, and for the first time in decades, she spoke. "You have lit a fire you will not survive." But it was too late. Azima lay crumpled on the ground, smoke curling from her mouth, her eyes still open, silent. And the air in Agala, which had always been warm and thick with dust, suddenly tasted like storm. The forest beyond Agala was not one of life. It was dry and cracked, a barren stretch of land that held no streams, no shade, only the brittle skeletons of trees long dead. That was where they left her, Azima, half-conscious, her mouth scorched, her voice stolen, her body curled like a broken leaf. The villagers believed she would die before sunrise, swallowed by hunger or heat or wild things that prowled without eyes. But the forest, though cruel, had its own secrets. And it had been waiting. She drifted in and out of awareness for 2 nights. Her throat blistered, her skin fevered. The world became a flicker of heat and shadows, until one shadow did not leave. The woman who found her wore rags knotted with shells. Her hair fell in tangled ropes to her waist, and her face was streaked with white ash. She moved without sound, like smoke. Her name was Naya, and the children of Agala had whispered about her for years, the mad woman in the burnt forest, the witch who spoke to ghosts. Naya didn't speak when she found Azima. She only looked into her eyes, nodded once, and lifted the girl onto her back. Azima woke on a bed of dry grass inside a clay hut that seemed to grow from the earth itself. The walls were marked with strange symbols. Skulls of small animals lined the shelves. A fire crackled in the center of the room, though there was no wood beneath it. For days, Naya fed her gruel through a reed, cleaned her wounds, cooled her burning skin with herbs dipped in river stones. Azima tried to speak once, and pain seared through her. No words came. Only a rasp, a dry gust from a dead cave. Naya watched her silently. Then, on the 7th night, she spoke. "They did to you what they did to me." Her voice was soft, and it came like wind across broken leaves. Azima stared, eyes wide. Naya took a pinch of ash from the fire and smeared it across her own tongue. "They burned mine, too," she whispered. "Different village. Long ago. I told a chief that his warriors killed their own to start a war. I was 12. She turned toward the fire and raised her hands. With a flick of her fingers, the flames swirled upward, forming the shape of a snake, its tail wrapped around smoke. "I learned another way to speak," she said. From that day on, Azima's silence was no longer a prison. It became a path. Naya taught her how to shape meaning with her hands, not crude gestures, but a precise language built on motion, rhythm, breath. More than that, she taught her to listen differently, not just with ears, but with skin, with heartbeats, with the shifting patterns of the wind. Azima learned how to whistle low and sharp so birds would answer. She traced messages in dust that ants would follow. But most of all, she learned the way of fire. Fire, Naya said, was a language older than any tongue. It danced. It devoured. It whispered. "Control it," Naya told her one night, cupping a tiny flame in her palm. "Or it will speak for you." Azima began to notice something strange. When her thoughts grew intense, when she remembered MBA's face, or her mother's scream, or her own blood on the council stone, the fire around her flared. Not wildly, not destructively, but as if it heard her sorrow and chose to answer. One night, while dreaming of the judgment square, Azima stirred in her sleep. Outside the hut, the air shimmered. The branches overhead, dry and broken, began to glow softly, not from burning, but from within, as though lit by moonlight no one could see. Naya stood at the edge of the hut and watched. "It has begun," she whispered. As the seasons turned, Azima changed. Her hair grew long and thick like tree roots. Her silence no longer felt like emptiness, it felt like thunder waiting to strike. Villagers who wandered too close to the forest said they saw smoke rising in patterns, snakes, eyes, hands reaching out. They heard birds call her name. The wind around the forest grew warm even on cold nights. Azima no longer looked like a child. She had grown into something else entirely, not woman, not ghost, not witch. Sometimes, she carved messages into bark and tied them to birds. They flew into villages far beyond Agala. Messages of warning. Of memory. Of truth. And sometimes, at the edge of Naya's fire, she would sit still and close her eyes, and every flame in the hut would lean toward her. She no longer needed to speak. Her presence told everything. Her scars were no longer wounds. They were script. And the fire, once used to silence her, now followed her like a faithful dog, flickering at her heels. One night, Naya placed her hand on Azima's shoulder and said nothing. Only nodded, as if to say, "Now you are ready." Azima looked toward the south, toward the place where the moon had watched her birth, and where liars had torn out her voice. She was not going back as a girl. She was going back as truth itself, and this time, truth would not whisper. It would burn. The village of Agala changed after Azima. At first, it appeared to flourish. With her gone, the council's grip tightened, and Elder MBA ruled with sharper precision. He claimed her exile had cleansed the land of misfortune. New fields were cleared, new huts built, and trade with nearby villages increased. The river swelled for 2 good seasons. Children were born healthy. Livestock fattened. People laughed again, but it was a laughter with eyes that darted over shoulders. No one spoke Azima's name anymore, not openly. Her mother had vanished the same night she was cast out, and the villagers had long since assumed she'd wandered into madness or died in some cave of grief. MBA forbade even whispers of them both. "The past is a coal we no longer touch," he said. "What's done is done. But truth has a way of waiting." It began one dry season, 3 years after the burning. A hut near the village well caught fire in the middle of the night. No lanterns had been lit. No one had been cooking. The flames were so quick, so precise, they devoured only that hut, and left the trees around it untouched. Inside had lived Elder Giru, one of the 5 who had stood in judgment of Azima. By dawn, all that remained were scorched bones in a circle of blackened earth. The air carried a sharp tang, not of smoke, but something older, deeper, like earth scorched from beneath. And the ashes curled along the wall in strange formations, almost like letters. The villagers whispered but said nothing aloud. Elder MBA called it a freak fire. An accident. Then, 2 weeks later, another fire. This time, Elder Qui's roof erupted in flame while his family slept. Only he died. His children swore no candles were lit, no embers left near the hearth. The flame, they said, didn't burn like normal fire, it didn't crackle or roar. It hissed. The people began to keep their lanterns low. They spoke more gently. They remembered every lie they had told. By the 4th fire, even the wind changed. It no longer carried coolness. It felt like breath, hot and deliberate. Crops began to rot. Rain clouds hovered, then drifted away. Chickens laid eggs that cracked before dawn. Goats birthed still kids. The high priestess, now stooped and nearly blind, stepped onto the council platform for the first time in months. Her voice was weaker now, but the silence around her made every word strike like a bell. "You tried to silence truth," she said. "Now truth shouts in flame." A murmur passed through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Someone asked if she meant Azima. She turned her head slowly toward Elder MBA. You know what I mean. MBA scowled, his once powerful body now slightly stooped, his beard gone thin. This is superstition, he snapped. Fires happen. Truth is not a spirit. But his hands trembled as he spoke. Because the night before, his own son had died. Not in a hot fire, but in a sudden burst of flame that engulfed him in the square. Witnesses said he was laughing when it began. Telling a story about a hunt. Bragging. Then mid-laugh, his eyes widened, and smoke poured from his mouth like water from a broken pot. Flames erupted from his shoulders, and in seconds, he was ash. No torch nearby. No oil. Just heat, and a wailing that sounded like wind, but deeper, more human. The next morning, a group of children found something on the east wall of the meeting hut. A figure drawn in ash. A girl with long hair, eyes made of fire, and a blackened mouth. They tried to wash it off. Water rolled over it, but the ash remained. Scrubbing made it clearer. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a warning. A woman recognized it. That's Azima, she whispered, voice shaking. That night, no one slept. Fires were doused. People prayed at the base of trees. Elders stood watch at their doors, clutching charms and muttering regrets. MBA sat alone, his hands over his face, his house silent. Outside, the wind blew gently through the village, warm and unrelenting. It carried a strange scent, not of smoke, but of something remembered. Something burned but not gone. And from the dry forest, a faint red glow blinked against the dark, like a flame breathing in the night, waiting. The night had no moon. No stars. No wind. Just stillness, deep and watching. Agala lay wrapped in a velvet blackness so heavy even the owls stayed silent. Fires were out. Lamps dimmed. The village had grown used to living in shadows, whispering fears, praying in silence for mercy from something no one dared name. But deep in the eastern forest, a glow began to pulse. Soft. Slow. Like a heartbeat under ash. Then the glow thickened, rose, and stretched into the sky, not light, but smoke. Thick columns coiling like arms. It didn't drift upward, it moved forward, crawling along the ground, low and patient. Like something remembering its way home. The first villager to see it was a boy, barely 6, peeking through his thatched roof after waking from a dream of fire. He watched the smoke slither past his compound, glowing faintly red inside. His scream awoke his mother, who ran to the door, only to collapse in silence as the smoke swelled and poured through the gate like water through a broken dam. Within minutes, the entire village was shrouded. People ran from their huts, choking on fear more than fumes. Some cried. Others prayed. A few dropped to their knees before anything appeared, already certain of what was coming. And then they saw her. At the center of the smoke, tall and motionless, stood a figure cloaked in ash. Her skin was dark and glowing from within, like embers trapped beneath flesh. Her hair flowed behind her like unraveling flame. No words left her mouth. No sound escaped her body. But her presence shouted louder than any voice. Azima had returned. But she was not the girl they had cast out. Not the trembling child whose screams they once ignored. She was fire. She walked slowly through the village, and with each step, the smoke thickened behind her. It curled around huts, pressed against walls, searched for the weight of secrets. Children clung to their mothers, elders covered their faces. The boldest among them, those who had always doubted, always denied, tried to speak. It wasn't me. The words hadn't finished before a gust of smoke burst from the speaker's mouth, and their shirt lit at the seams. Flames raced up their arms like truth too long buried. The villagers screamed as the man dropped, rolling in dust, only to rise again with skin scorched and voice gone. Azima did not turn her head. She moved from compound to compound, never knocking, never entering, only standing outside the doors. And each time, the same happened. If lies had lived inside, they ignited. Quietly, mercilessly. One hut erupted into flame without touch. Another crumbled inward as its matriarch fell to her knees, weeping, confessing all the betrayals her family had buried for years. One house didn't burn at all, but the woman inside ran into the night, tearing at her hair, screaming of poison she once gave her own sister. No one had spoken to Azima. No one dared. But her silence spoke everything. And still, she burned no one who told the truth. Not even the hardest ones. A boy stepped forward, shaking, and confessed stealing his neighbor's goat a season ago. He trembled, waiting for the fire. But Azima's cloak only stirred slightly, and nothing happened. A girl confessed a lie she told about her mother. No smoke rose. It became clear, she had not returned for vengeance. She had returned for truth. The lies that had built Agala's power, its order, its false peace, they were what fueled the fire now. And the fire was hungry. A group of villagers, desperate to stop the burning, set out toward the forest to find her mother. She had been spotted once years ago living alone in the abandoned edge huts near the river. They found her gathering herbs by the water, old but not broken. Her eyes had the same steel Azima's now carried. "We need her," they begged. "She may be the only one she'll listen to." The woman said nothing. Just followed. By the time they reached the square, Azima stood in the center again, facing the old council hut. The smoke surrounded her like a throne of ash. Elder MBA was nowhere in sight. Her mother stepped into view. For the first time since her return, Azima moved, not away, but toward. The fire shifted around her, and as she stood before the woman who had once held her through screams, a strange thing happened. The flames turned blue. Not hot, not wild, cool, steady, flickering like the edge of a calm ocean. The villagers gasped, some kneeling again, this time in awe. Azima raised a hand, slowly, and touched her mother's cheek. The woman whispered her name, just once. Azima. No flames answered. No smoke stirred. Only peace. A silent, gentle warmth spread through the air. For a breath, the whole village felt still. And then, Azima turned. She raised both hands, palms open to the sky, and the smoke around her rose higher, spinning into a pillar that stretched beyond the rooftops. This was not wrath. This was not vengeance. This was judgment. Not for crimes written in law, but for truths buried in shame. She had not come to punish individuals. She had come to burn the foundation of Agala's lies, to rip out the rot that had grown fat in silence. The villagers understood. And in the hush that followed, one old man dropped to his knees and whispered, "Let the truth live." Azima's flames did not touch him. She turned, walking back into the smoke that followed her like loyal dogs. Behind her, the air was cleaner, the ground warm. Some would say the village smelled different after that night. Others swore the walls no longer whispered when they lied. But all agreed, if you lied in Agala now, the smoke listened. And if you lied too well, it burned. Purpose, turn the tables, Azima brings a final reckoning to the elders. No one saw her write. No one saw her carve. But one by one, the walls of Agala began to speak. On the sides of clay huts. On temple stones. Even on the carved gates of the elders' homes. Words appeared, scorched deep into the surface, the letters glowing faintly as if still alive. The same message on every wall. Come to the square. Speak your truth, or be spoken by fire. At first, the village murmured, uneasy. Elders locked their doors. Priests prayed to idols they hadn't bowed to in years. But they knew, they all knew. The fire that had spared no lie now summoned them. By dusk, the entire village had gathered in the square. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. In the center, a ring of fire burned low and steady, silent, hungry. Around it stood the last remaining elders, cloaked in years and shame. And from the far edge of the crowd stepped Azima. Her feet made no sound on the earth. Her hair was braided in coils of black and red, ash still clinging to her. Her eyes no longer held questions, only judgment. From the sleeves of her robe, tongues of flame curled lazily, as if waiting. She did not speak. She could not. But the fire did. And it remembered everything. From the heart of the ring, smoke began to rise, thick, dark, and twisting. It swirled above the elders' heads, then sharpened into shapes. Visions. Memories pulled from the bones of Agala itself. The villagers gasped. There, the smoke shaped the image of Elder Tomba handing silver to a guard in exchange for silence, while a mother wept behind him. There, Elder Needy whispering falsehoods to exile a girl who saw too much. And there, the night they tied Azima down. Every elder's face. Every voice raised to silence her. Elder Tomba fell to his knees. I did not know, he stammered. The fire hissed. He sobbed, his head bowed to the dirt. I was afraid. I knew it was wrong. But I was afraid. The fire pulsed, and then dimmed before him. It left him untouched. A low murmur spread through the crowd. But Elder Needy stepped forward, trembling. This is sorcery. Lies and smoke. I never. Before the last word left her lips, the fire leapt. It struck her chest like a scream. She didn't burn like wood, she crumbled, slowly, like a statue made of dried leaves. Ash filled the air, and when the smoke cleared, only her sandals remained. Children began to cry. Mothers clutched them close. Then came Elder MBA. He did not tremble. Did not kneel. He stepped forward, his chin raised, robes still stained with years of power. I did what I had to, he said. For peace. For order. She would have torn this village apart. Azima stepped forward now, her bare feet crossing the fire ring unharmed. The flame parted before her. She stood before MBA, inches away, her eyes locked onto his. He met her stare. She was dangerous, he said again, louder, as if trying to convince the wind itself. She spoke too much. Saw too much. I kept this village whole. Azima raised her hand. Flames unfurled from her sleeves like wings, sweeping wide, casting tall shadows across the square. The wind shifted. Smoke twisted toward MBA's house in the distance. It caught fire. The villagers turned in shock. His house, the biggest in Agala, was suddenly ablaze. The roof caved in first. Then the front steps. The earth itself seemed to heave as flames ate it whole. MBA turned, panicked, and tried to speak. But his voice caught. He coughed. Once. Twice. Black smoke poured from his mouth. His tongue turned gray, crumbling. He fell to his knees, clawing at his throat as ashes spilled down his chest. No one moved to help him. Azima stepped back, her hands still open, fire licking at her fingertips. From the edge of the circle came a rasping breath. The high priestess, once regal, now barely standing, pushed through the crowd, leaning heavily on her staff. Her skin sagged, her eyes hollow, but her voice trembled with something the others lacked. Remorse. She fell to her knees before Azima. Forgive us, she whispered, her voice barely more than wind. Forgive us, flame-bearer of truth. Azima tilted her head, watching her. The flames in her sleeves receded, slowly curling back as if nodding. Then the wind picked up, not harsh, but sacred. It swept through the square, lifting ash and dust in memory. For a moment, the entire village was cloaked in soft firelight. And Azima turned and walked away. No words. No vengeance. Only fire. And truth. At the edge of Agala, where the trees thinned and ash still kissed the soil, Azima built her new home. It was no palace, no shrine, just a wide, open space with walls of mud, shaped into graceful curves. There were no doors. No windows. No locks. The wind passed freely through, and firelight flickered even when no torch was lit. The villagers watched in awe as she shaped it, not with tools, but with her fingers drawing symbols in the dirt. Where she marked, flame curled. Where she paused, the wind stilled. Her hut became a place not of hiding, but of welcome and warning. For anyone could enter, but they had to bring no lies with them. The children came first. They sat around her silently, watching her fingers move. Azima didn't speak, she hadn't since the council burned her tongue. But her hands, her breath, and the gentle smoke that danced from her palms told them everything. She taught them how to write truth in smoke. How to shape it so that secrets, once hidden, could rise without shame. At first, they thought it was magic. But Azima only smiled with her eyes and pointed to their chests, as if to say, "You have it too. You always have." She taught them symbols for pain and joy, for betrayal and apology. She taught them the difference between silence that hides, and silence that heals. Soon, adults began to come as well. One by one, they entered her doorless home, hesitant, ashamed, and heavy with secrets. They sat before her, trying to speak but unsure how. Azima would raise a hand and breathe, and smoke would rise between them, forming quiet messages. Sometimes it was a word, guilt. Sometimes it was a shape, a face, a house, a grave. And then the visitor would understand, Azima had already heard the truth. Not with ears, but with the fire that now lived inside her. And yet, she did not judge. She only waited for them to face it too. It was the beginning of a new Agala. In the center of the village, where once the council had judged from high stools and whipped backs under the sun, a new fire was built. Not a fire of punishment, a fire of confession. Azima called it the fire of truth, and though she never said its name aloud, the people learned it by how it behaved. When someone stood before it and spoke honestly, no matter how dark their truth, the flame glowed a soft, peaceful blue. But if anyone tried to twist the truth, to lie, the fire hissed. The air would grow heavy. The flame would flicker orange and sharp, and the person would cough, choke, and sometimes fall to their knees, spitting black soot. There were no whips anymore. No prisons. No elders judging behind closed doors. Just a fire, a circle of witnesses, and a truth that refused to stay buried. Children began to light small fires outside their homes at night, not for warmth, but for reverence. Parents told stories of the girl who could once hear lies and now hears everything. They left small offerings, millet, honey, beads. Not as bribes, but as thanks. They said, "Leave a gift for the girl who guards words." Azima never asked for offerings. But when she passed by those fires, the flames would rise higher, and the offerings would vanish, not consumed, just gone. As if taken into some deeper part of the truth. One day, a young girl no older than Azima had been when she was silenced stood before the fire of truth. The villagers gathered. They'd grown used to these rituals, but this time felt different. The girl trembled as she stepped forward. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Her mother clutched her hand, but the child stepped away and stood alone. "I stole," she said. "I took a golden bracelet from the trader's cart and hid it in my doll." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The trader stepped forward, frowning. But before he could speak, the fire answered. It rose, not in heat, not in fury, but in a slow, graceful dance of blue. The girl gasped. The crowd fell silent. Azima stood near the fire, her face calm. She nodded once, slow and deep. And then, the trader stepped forward, knelt beside the girl, and placed a bead bracelet in her palm. "You told the truth. That is worth more than gold." The villagers applauded. Not because a crime was confessed, but because a child had trusted the flame. From that night onward, truth was no longer a weapon in Agala. It was a gift. Azima became a living legend. She walked the village often, her cloak still woven with ash, her silence now sacred. Birds followed her. Fireflies gathered in her footsteps. When someone lied even in jest, they would stop, coughing softly, and then laugh in embarrassment. They no longer feared her. They feared themselves, when they were not honest. And slowly, Agala changed. There were no more secret trials. No more midnight torches. No more cries behind closed huts. The elders who remained told stories of the old days, not to glorify them, but to warn. They said, "Remember what happened when we burned the truth." And children, now raised in a village without lies, would answer, "That's why we feed the fire." Azima, in her silence, became Agala's most powerful voice. And though her tongue was long gone, burned black in a night of fear and ignorance, her truth now lived in every flame, every gesture, every ash-marked wall. She had not only returned. She had rebuilt the world she was once exiled from, not with vengeance, but with fire that listened, and silence that spoke more than words ever could. By the time dawn arrived, Azima was gone. No footprints led away from the ash ring where she had last stood. Only silence lingered in the wind, thick with the scent of smoldering earth. Her mother searched frantically, calling out in broken sobs, though she knew there would be no answer. All she found, resting gently on the blackened soil, was a perfectly formed shape, a tongue carved from ash, untouched by wind or rain. The villagers gathered quietly. Some wept. Some knelt. And others stood in reverent awe. They understood without needing words, Azima had not left, she had become something eternal. Rumors spread like wildfire across distant lands. Some claimed Azima had stepped into the fire and melted into its very soul, becoming the eternal flame that now flickered in every truth spoken. Others whispered she had walked beyond Agala, veiled in smoke, visiting villages where truth was still hunted and tongues were still burned for honesty. Wherever she went, fire followed. And lies vanished. In Agala, a change deeper than rebuilding began. At the edge of the village, where her doorless house once stood, a shrine was built. But it held no idols, no statues, no stone likeness of her face. It was simply fire, a pit kept burning night and day. Children were told never to blow on it, never to cook with it, never to speak near it unless they meant what they said. That fire was Azima's, they said. It listens. Mothers began to hum lullabies that weren't really songs but stories, wordless ones, carried in low tones and gentle heat. They'd whisper to their babies, "Once there was a girl who spoke truth so sharp, the village bled." And instead of healing, they burned her. But she came back. Not for revenge. For justice. In the schools, elders no longer taught with sticks and whips but sat by open flames. Lessons were told through smoke, in looping wisps that the children watched wide-eyed. They learned to see shapes in flame, to understand when a curl of smoke meant danger, or when a flicker meant shame. They learned that silence was sacred, but only if it protected truth, not if it buried it. And something else took root. People who lied, even small lies, found strange things happening. The air around them grew warmer. Candles lit themselves. Their throats itched, and they coughed dry soot. It didn't matter if the lie was harmless. Agala no longer tolerated dishonesty. Truth had a guardian now, even in absence. A traveling poet once wandered into Agala and asked for a place to rest. An elder offered his home. The poet asked if he could trust the elder's promise of safety. The old man, long corrupted by the past, tried to hide the truth, tried to lie, just a little. As he spoke, the walls behind him blackened and hissed. Smoke crept up the beams. Flames licked out from the roof. And no one helped him put it out. The poet, shaken but alive, carved something on a cave near the southern hills before leaving. She spoke once, they burned her. She never spoke again, but her silence burned the world. Years passed. Generations changed. And still, the fire in the temple burned. Pilgrims began arriving, people from other villages, from across mountains and deserts. They brought children who had lied, elders who had hidden secrets, rulers who ruled with fear. They came not for punishment, but to sit by the flame and listen. Some claimed they saw her there, sitting by the pit, face covered in ash, fingers dancing in the firelight. Others saw only smoke curling upward into the shape of a young girl's silhouette. No one ever heard her voice again. But in every corner of Agala, from market stalls to moonlit gatherings, people paused before speaking. Because truth, now, was not just sacred. It was watched. Guarded. And once a year, on the night when the moon vanished entirely, the villagers gathered in silence around the fire pit. No speeches. No rituals. Just presence. Children were told, "Tonight, she walks." Some left offerings, food, beads, charcoal drawings of tongues. Some left apologies written in smoke on cloth, which they tossed into the flames. And when the fire rose blue, just for a second, they knew she had heard. Azima had become more than the girl they had silenced. She had become myth, memory, mirror. And whenever someone dared to crush truth, wherever that might be, fire flickered nearby. It curled up through floorboards, traced doorways, and whispered back what had been buried. Because even without a tongue, Azima spoke. And truth listened. And the world burned cleaner for it.